What happens when Hollywood's golden boy meets late-night television's biggest ego? When Ben Affleck walked onto that Jimmy Kimmel set, nobody expected the conversation to spiral into one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history. What started as a routine promotional appearance turned into a battle of wits that would leave audiences stunned and one A-list actor walking off stage in disgust. This is the untold story of how Jimmy Kimmel's arrogance and calculated cruelty pushed one of Hollywood's most respected actors to his breaking point. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrity feuds on late-night television. The atmosphere in the Jimmy Kimmel live studio felt different that evening. The usual pre-show energy was there, the audience chattering excitedly, the cameras being adjusted, but there was something in the air that nobody could quite identify. Ben Affleck had arrived earlier than usual, spending extra time in his dressing room, preparing for what should have been a straightforward interview about his latest directorial project. The film had been receiving critical acclaim, and Ben was genuinely excited to discuss the creative process behind it. Jimmy Kimmel, however, had other plans entirely. In the hours leading up to the show, production assistants noticed Jimmy's mood had shifted. He was more aggressive with his staff, more demanding than usual, and there were whispers that he had been digging into research that went far beyond the typical talking points. Some crew members who had worked with Jimmy for years said they had never seen him quite like this, almost as if he was preparing for battle rather than a friendly chat with a longtime Hollywood colleague. As Ben settled into the guest chair, the familiar red curtain behind him and the bright studio lights creating their usual warm glow, Jimmy opened with what seemed like standard pleasantries. The audience was primed for laughs, expecting the kind of comfortable banter that had made Jimmy's show a staple of late-night television. Ben smiled genuinely, ready to share stories about his passion project and connect with the audience that had supported him throughout his career. But Jimmy had clearly done his homework, and not the kind that celebrates an artist's work. Instead of asking about the film's themes or Ben's experience directing, Jimmy immediately pivoted to personal territory that caught Ben completely off guard. The host's tone shifted from welcoming to almost prosecutorial as he began referencing tabloid stories and gossip that had nothing to do with why Ben was supposed to be there. "So Ben," Jimmy said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "before we talk about your movie, I think the audience is really curious about some of the more interesting stories that have been circulating about your personal life lately." The studio audience, sensing the shift in energy, grew quieter. Ben's posture changed slightly, his media-trained smile becoming more cautious as he tried to redirect the conversation back to his work. "Well, Jimmy, I'm really here to talk about the film," Ben replied diplomatically, "and I think people are going to be surprised by the story we're telling. It's something I've been passionate about for years." But Jimmy wasn't interested in letting his guest control the narrative. This was his show, his stage, and he seemed determined to extract entertainment value from Ben's discomfort rather than celebrating his artistic achievements. The questioning became more invasive, more personal, touching on subjects that had been tabloid fodder but had no relevance to the professional work Ben was there to promote. Each attempt Ben made to steer the conversation toward his film was met with Jimmy's insistence on dwelling in gossip territory. The audience began to sense the tension, the uncomfortable energy that happens when entertainment crosses the line into something more predatory. Ben's professionalism was being tested in real time, live on national television. Every response he gave was measured, every attempt to maintain dignity while dealing with a host who seemed more interested in creating viral moments than conducting a respectful interview. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every moment of restraint, as Ben realized this wasn't going to be the conversation he had prepared for. What made the situation even more uncomfortable was Jimmy's apparent enjoyment of his guests' discomfort. The host seemed to feed off the tension he was creating, pushing boundaries that other interviewers had respected. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just poor interviewing technique. It was a deliberate strategy to generate controversy, at Ben's expense. The studio crew, many of whom had worked in television for decades, began exchanging glances. Veteran camera operators and sound technicians who had seen countless interviews recognized that something was going very wrong. The energy in the room was shifting from entertainment to something much more uncomfortable, and everyone could feel it building toward a moment that nobody would forget. Ben's jaw tightened as Jimmy continued his relentless pursuit of personal drama over professional discussion. The actor had been in enough interviews to recognize when a host was deliberately trying to provoke rather than genuinely engage, and Jimmy was making no effort to hide his intentions. The audience, initially excited for celebrity gossip, was beginning to feel the uncomfortable reality of watching someone being systematically humiliated on live television. "You know what, Jimmy?" Ben said, his voice remaining steady but carrying a new edge. "I came here as a courtesy, to talk about work that I'm proud of. Work that involved hundreds of talented people who deserve to have their story told." He leaned forward slightly, making direct eye contact with his host. "But it seems like you're more interested in tabloid trash than actual journalism." Jimmy's response revealed the full extent of his arrogance. Rather than acknowledging the valid criticism or attempting to redirect toward more appropriate topics, he doubled down with a smirk that suggested he was enjoying the confrontation. "Hey, this is entertainment, Ben. People want to know about the real you, not just the sanitized version your publicist wants them to see." The condescension in Jimmy's voice was unmistakable, and it clearly struck a nerve with Ben. Here was a talk show host, someone whose job was supposed to be facilitating interesting conversations and making guests feel welcome, openly admitting that he viewed his role as some kind of tabloid interrogator. The mask was completely off now, and the audience was witnessing the ugly reality of how some media personalities view the celebrities who make their shows possible. The real me? Ben's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. The real me is someone who has worked in this industry for over 2 decades, who has directed films that have won Academy Awards, who employs hundreds of people and tries to tell stories that matter. But apparently, that's not interesting enough. "For your show," Jimmy seemed to mistake Ben's rising frustration for weakness, an opportunity to press even harder. "Come on, don't be so sensitive. This is how these interviews work. People want the drama. They want the personal stuff. That's what gets views. That's what people talk about tomorrow." The calculation in Jimmy's response was chilling. He was openly explaining his philosophy of using guests as content fodder, extracting whatever personal drama he could mine from their lives for the sake of ratings and social media buzz. There was no pretense of respect, no acknowledgement that the person sitting across from him was a human being deserving of basic dignity, not just a source of entertainment material. Ben stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the studio floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room. "You know what gets views, Jimmy? Respect. Actual conversation. Treating your guests like human beings instead of carnival attractions." The audience was completely quiet now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. "If you think I'm going to sit here and let you turn my personal life into your comedy material while ignoring the work that actually matters, you're wrong." Ben's voice was controlled but firm, carrying the authority of someone who had finally reached their limit. "This isn't journalism. This isn't entertainment. This is just cruelty dressed up as comedy." Jimmy's face flushed slightly, perhaps realizing that his strategy had backfired spectacularly. But instead of backing down or offering any kind of apology, he made the situation infinitely worse by attempting to turn the blame back on his guest. "Hey, nobody forced you to come on the show, Ben. If you can't handle a few questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." The audacity of the statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Jimmy was essentially saying that appearing on his show meant surrendering all dignity and privacy, that guests should expect to be treated poorly and should be grateful for the privilege. It was a worldview that revealed everything wrong with certain corners of the entertainment industry, where power imbalances are exploited for cheap thrills. Ben shook his head slowly, a gesture that conveyed both disappointment and disgust. "You're right, Jimmy. Nobody forced me to come here, and nobody's forcing me to stay." The finality in his voice made it clear that this interview was over, regardless of what Jimmy or the producers might want. The studio fell into an almost surreal quiet, broken only by the soft hum of cameras that were still rolling, capturing every moment of this unprecedented breakdown in late-night television decorum. Production assistants stood frozen, unsure whether they should intervene or let the scene play out. This was uncharted territory for everyone involved. Jimmy's desperation became palpable as he realized the interview was slipping completely out of his control. Instead of accepting responsibility for creating the hostile environment, he made one final attempt to salvage the situation by trying to manipulate both Ben and the audience. "Come on, Ben, don't be dramatic. We're just having a conversation here. The audience came to see you, don't disappoint them." The manipulation was transparent and insulting. Jimmy was attempting to use the audience as leverage, trying to make Ben feel guilty for refusing to continue participating in his own humiliation. It was a classic abuser tactic, shifting blame and responsibility while painting himself as the reasonable party in an unreasonable situation. Ben turned to face the audience directly, bypassing Jimmy entirely. "I'm sorry you had to witness this," he said with genuine sincerity. "You deserved better than watching someone try to tear down another person for entertainment. You deserved an actual conversation about art, about creativity, about the amazing work done by the cast and crew of this film." The directness of Ben's address to the audience was powerful and effective. He was treating them with the respect that Jimmy had failed to show either his guest or his viewers. By speaking to them as intelligent people who could recognize the difference between legitimate entertainment and cruelty, Ben elevated the entire room while simultaneously highlighting Jimmy's failures as a host. Jimmy, perhaps recognizing that he was losing the audience's sympathy, made his biggest mistake yet. "Fine, walk away then. That's very professional, Ben. Really shows your character." The sarcasm dripped from his words, but the intended effect backfired completely. Instead of making Ben look bad, Jimmy's final comment revealed the full extent of his pettiness and unprofessionalism. "You want to talk about character?" Ben's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the calm exterior. "Character is treating people with dignity. Character is using your platform to lift people up, not tear them down. Character is remembering that the person sitting across from you isn't just content for your show, they're a human being." The contrast between the two men had never been more stark. Ben, even in his anger and frustration, maintained his composure and spoke with substance about values and respect. Jimmy, meanwhile, had devolved into petty insults and manipulation tactics that revealed everything about his character that the audience needed to know. As Ben walked toward the exit, his movement was deliberate and dignified. There was no storming off, no dramatic gestures, just a man who had been pushed beyond his limit, finally choosing to remove himself from a toxic situation. The cameras followed him, capturing what would become one of the most talked-about moments in late-night television history. Jimmy sat alone at his desk, the empty guest chair beside him serving as a powerful visual representation of his failure, as a host and as a person. The audience remained silent, processing what they had just witnessed. Many would later describe feeling complicit in something ugly, wishing they had somehow intervened or shown support for Ben during the ordeal. The production team scrambled to figure out how to handle the remaining showtime, but the damage was already done. Social media exploded within minutes, with viewers who had watched live sharing their shock and disgust at Jimmy's behavior. The consensus was immediate and overwhelming. Ben had conducted himself with class and dignity, while Jimmy had revealed himself to be everything wrong with celebrity culture. In the days that followed, The incident would spark broader conversations about the responsibility of media personalities and the treatment of guests on television shows. Many other celebrities would come forward with their own stories of uncomfortable interviews and manipulative hosts, creating a moment of reckoning for the industry. Ben's decision to walk away became a symbol of standing up to bullying and refusing to participate in one's own degradation. His calm, measured response in the face of deliberate provocation showed a level of character that resonated with audiences who were tired of seeing celebrities treated as objects rather than people. The empty chair that Jimmy stared at for the remainder of that segment became an unintentional metaphor for the respect and dignity that had walked out of his studio that night. It was a powerful reminder that treating people poorly has consequences, and that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply refusing to participate in it. What did you think about Ben's decision to walk away? Was he right to stand up for himself? Or should celebrities expect this kind of treatment when they appear on talk shows? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories from Hollywood that you won't hear anywhere else.